Excellent. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's panel on publishing on information literacy, a conversation with LIS journal editors. We have several journals represented today, and we're excited to put all of us in conversation about publishing about information literacy. My name is Amanda Folk. I am the current chair of ACRL's Student Learning and Information Literacy Committee, which we refer to as SLILC. I will be shortly, in less than a month, handing the baton over to our vice chair, Andrea Baer, to take leadership. So I'm very excited that this is one of the last things that I'll be doing as chair of this committee. There we go. So an introduction and some context for today's conversation. The presenters, all of us, the facilitation team and the panelists, aim to make visible editors' processes and expectations when reviewing submitted manuscripts. This event is intended to lower the bar for colleagues who are interested in learning more about publishing in journals and to help increase the diversity of voices and perspectives published related to information literacy. And a little bit of context about how we got to where we are today. Many of you may know that the SLILC committee oversees the perspectives on the framework column that's published in College and Research Libraries News. And not quite a year ago, we put a call out for proposals for the column, and we had a really, really great pool of proposals that came through. But the co-leads of our publications team, Lorna and Gina, who I'll introduce in a moment with all of our panelists, raised concerns about, do we really have diversity of voices and perspectives among our column proposals? And this may be a larger issue that we're seeing, not just in publishing generally, but specifically with information literacy. So we brainstormed some ways that we thought maybe we could help encourage new voices and diverse perspectives to join the conversation in the published literature related to information literacy. And some of you may have attended a really excellent panel that Allison Hosier put together, I believe in November of last year, with some journal editors about our thoughts and practices related to AI, artificial intelligence. And it went so well, and all of us had a great time participating in it. We thought we would try to do something similar for this topic. So that's a little bit of how we got to where we are today. Our panelists today, again, we have a great lineup of editors. There are many, many more editors and journals that we could have included who would have been wonderful as well, but this is our starting point for today's conversation. We have Amanda Nichols-Hess, who's on the editorial board for College and Research Libraries News, Kristen Tottleben, editor-in-chief of College and Research Libraries. We have Allison Hosier and Jacqueline Williams, who are editors for Communications and Information Literacy. We have Allison Hicks, who is the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Information Literacy, who just released their 50th anniversary of information literacy issue today, if you haven't gotten a chance to check it out yet. Michelle Kraft, who is editor-in-chief of the Journal of the Medical Library Association, and Elisa Stern-Cahoy, who is the editor-in-chief for Portal, Libraries in the Academy. I will be today's moderator, but hopefully you won't be hearing too much from me other than guiding today's conversation a little bit. I want to recognize the work that my SLILC colleagues have done in putting together today's presentation. Andrea Baer, who is our vice chair, and Lorna Dawes and Gina Kessler-Lee, who are the leads of our publications team, have done a lot of work with myself and all of the panelists to make today's panel a reality. So thank you so much to everyone who has helped to put this together. We'd like to start off with two acknowledgements. First is a positionality statement, and we asked the editors if they were comfortable sharing some aspects of their identities to help us shape a kind of a group positionality for today's panel presentation. All of the panelists here today who disclose their salient identities to the organizers identify as white, cisgender, able-bodied women. We also recognize that there are many dimensions of identity that cannot be fully encapsulated within this brief statement. The panel organizers acknowledge that this composition of the panel reflects that librarianship and LIS scholarships remain heavily influenced by dominant power structures of white supremacy, transnesia, and ableism. The panel also reflects the feminized labor that goes into editorial work. We regret that we did not succeed in recruiting as diverse of a panel as we intended. This panel nonetheless aims to make journal publishing more accessible for all library workers, especially for those whose voices have been and continue to be less represented in LIS scholarship. So hopefully today is the beginning of a new chapter. We would also like to acknowledge the land that all of us are currently inhabiting. We would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. We also acknowledge that many of us are uninvited settlers on these lands. While we meet today on a virtual platform, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land which we each call home. And with that, we're going to move into the panel discussion. So we do have some pre-planned content for today, and you'll see in a few moments that our editors have provided information on slides here. We have some themes that each editor will address, so all of the participants can get to know each of these journals a little bit better. And then there will be some questions that some of our panelists have some prepared content for, and others may jump in with perspectives because again, this is a conversation, a discussion. We will hopefully move through our planned content in about 55 to 60 minutes. So hopefully by the top of the hour, we'll be able to move to a Q&A from the audience. And both Gina and Lorna will be assisting in helping to identify questions that come through the Q&A or the chat. If you have a question, please do try to put that in the Q&A so it's clear to the facilitators that there's a question that somebody would like to have answered. And so with that, if all of our panelists are ready, I will move to our first set of slides. So, Kristen, could you please kick us off in talking about the overview and scope of college and research libraries?
Absolutely. Thanks, Amanda. So for the scope of college and research libraries, it's very broad, all fields of interest and concern to academic and research libraries. Original research is the main focus. I should also say that innovative new contributions to the field of academic librarianship are highly sought after for the journal. It's the official journal for the Association of College and Research Libraries, and it's been publishing since 1939. And this is also on our author guidelines. Submissions may also include narratives of successful and unsuccessful ventures, thoughtful discussions of issues in librarianship, and other suitable subjects.
Thank you, Kristen. And Amanda, could you please tell us a little bit more about College and Research Libraries news?
Sure. Thanks, Amanda. Hi, everybody. I'm Amanda Hess. I'm currently the chair of the editorial board of College and Research Libraries News, which is the official news magazine and publication of record of the Association of College and Research Libraries. It's connected with College and Research Libraries, obviously, but is more professionally focused. So we are publishing articles on trends and practices in academic and research libraries, but we're not focused on or emphasizing the research piece like Kristen and the folks at CNRL are doing. We also have monthly columns or regular features that focus on scholarly communications, the framework. We have a relatively new column on academic library workers in conversation and other current issues and topics.
Thank you, Amanda. And now I'm not sure if I'm passing it to Jacqueline or Allison or both to talk a little bit about communications and information literacy.
I think this one is me. Hi, everybody. My name is Allison Hosier, and I am one of the co-editors-in-chief of Communications Information Literacy, along with Jacqueline, who's here with me today, Chris Hollister, and April Schweikard. And I'm actually the newest one. I've been in my position for, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 years now, but it's been a little while, but not too long. But yeah, so Communications and Information Literacy, if you're not familiar, is an open access peer-reviewed journal. We're devoted to the advancement of information literacy research, practice, theory, and opinion. Primarily our focus is in higher education. I think sometimes we do consider articles that are about, information literacy, maybe in high school or something like that, but primarily our focus is higher education. But we welcome manuscripts on teaching and learning, innovations, theory and application, assessment, history, or other relevant aspects of information literacy. So I'm really excited to be here today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Allison. And now moving to another Allison, Allison with 2 L's for the Journal of Information Literacy.
Actually, I'm Alison with 1 L.
Oh, I thought I was so clever too. Apologies.
Not at all. Thanks, Amanda. Hi, everyone. I'm Alison Hicks, and I'm the editor of the Journal of Information Literacy, which is a position I've held for the last 4 years. So the Journal of Information Literacy is based in the UK, but we are an international peer-reviewed journal, and we're aimed at librarians, information professionals, and academics who teach and/or research aspects of information literacy. And of particular interest to us, we aim with our research that we publish, we aim to push the boundaries of information literacy thinking, particularly obviously in practice, but also in theory, and importantly, a method. That's really important to us as well, to think about the methods that we use to research information literacy. And we also have a big focus on developing critical understandings of information literacy in a really broad array of contexts. Obviously, higher education is a big area of ours, but we're especially keen to develop thinking about information literacy within everyday contexts, secondary and primary education, as well as health and the workplace as well.
Thank you, Allison. And next we have Michelle with the Journal of the Medical Library Association.
Hi, I'm Michelle Kraft. I'm the editor of the Journal of the Medical Library Association. We're a peer-reviewed journal. We're open access, and we have no APCs to publish within, and we're published quarterly. Our focus is on research aimed at advancing the knowledge base and practice of health sciences librarianship. And that sounds pretty heady, but it's really, we're looking for articles from people who are doing something within biomedical, health sciences. You don't have to be a medical librarian or a hospital librarian to publish. You can be a public or an academic librarian, or not even a librarian. But if you're doing something within consumer health and libraries, that kind of stuff, those are the things that we're interested in.
Thank you, Michelle. And if I may ask a very quick follow-up question, could you give a sentence or two about what an APC is for our attendees?
Oh, an APC is author publishing charges. So if you wanted to publish in an open access journal, a majority, not all, but many journals charge a fee to make that article freely available in open access. Articles that are open access can be read by anybody, not just subscribing libraries or subscribers. But like I said, a lot of journals charge an APC, an author publishing charge, to offset the costs of that. We as a journal are supported by the Medical Library Association, and as a result, we are fully open access, requiring no charges. So when somebody publishes with us, it is open access, everybody sees it. You don't have to be a subscriber to the journal.
Thank you so much. And I think we're fortunate that we do have a couple of journals here today who have a similar approach to open access. Thank you, Michelle. Oops. There we go. And last but definitely not least, even though I got a little finger happy there, we have Alicia with Portal Libraries in the Academy.
Thanks, Amanda. So my name is Elisa Cahoy, and since January 2023, I have been the editor of Portal Libraries and the Academy. And Portal has a very broad lens on scholarship in library and information science. We really do focus on the role of academic libraries within higher education in general. So that covers a lot of different topics, including information literacy scholarship. And, you know, I note that we publish qualitative and quantitative research, as well as we have multiple types of feature articles, which can be more practice focused as well. Within Portal, we have just a wide range of different possibilities that can be explored within our journal. And it's great to see in our attendees list today, lots of past Portal authors out there as well.
Lisa, we did have one question come through that we may want to address right now, and that is a question about whether or not college and research libraries news is peer reviewed. And I can answer that at least some of those, the content in that that publication are peer reviewed insofar as we have members of SLILC who select the content and help guide authors through the process of publishing in the perspectives on the framework column, but I'm not sure about other content. Amanda, would you be comfortable answering that question?
Yes, and beat me to the punch. I was going to mention that because that does differentiate CNRL news on this panel, especially from the other publications, because the majority of the content, other than the columns, as Amanda said, SLILC has a column, RESEC, or Research in the Scholarly Environment, has a column that we have a subgroup of folks who are peer reviewing submissions from that ACRL committee. But other than that, it's editorial review. So I'll talk a little bit more. I can talk a little bit more about that when we get to it, but I'm also happy to share more now. But yes, that is a different thing. And Amanda, I don't know if you can speak to this, but I don't know that it's a blind peer review necessarily in terms of the peer review that is happening. So it's a little bit different than the other publications on this webinar.
Great, thank you, Amanda. Lorna or Gina, would you be able to speak to the SLILC practice? Do you do anonymous peer review of the proposals and then the articles that come through for the perspectives on the framework column?
Sure. Yeah, so we have everyone who is on the publications team goes through and reviews. We usually have a call for proposals once every year or two to get a full slate of articles. And then we also will select, or if unsolicited manuscripts come in, we might slot those in as we have openings as well. And so then the entire publications team will review those before we select which ones get added to our calendar. And then we sort of have an open peer review process where you get to see exactly which of the team members are, usually about half the team will review any particular article to make structural and sort of content and flow edits, and you'll be able to see exactly which comments are coming from which members of the team. So it's pretty open, and we've gotten some feedback that folks appreciate the diversity of perspectives that go into providing just sort of readerly feedback on their article.
Thank you so much, Gina. All right, so now we're going to move to our second question. What types of submissions do you accept? Kristen, please kick us off.
So college and research libraries, I'll also add that it's open access journal. I believe CNRL has been publishing open access since 2014. The types of submissions that that are accepted are editorials, research articles, and letters to the editor are welcome, but may or may not be published, depending on space and depending on the letter and the wishes of the writer as well.
Excellent. And we may cover this a little bit later, but the research articles, would that typically be the peer-reviewed content that appears in college and research libraries?
Oh, yes. Thank you for clarifying. The editorials would primarily be reviewed by me and receive some copy editing later if accepted. The research articles would go undergo double anonymous peer review.
And thank you. And a reminder to our audience too, some of these the format types, genres, some of the names may be new to you. You may not be familiar with the difference between an editorial and a letter and a research article. I think this is going to come up again at some point, but each of these journals have robust author guidelines and submission guidelines. So after today's discussion, I do encourage folks, if you need more information about what some of these things mean than we're able to cover today, I highly recommend that you check those out for each journal. Excellent. Amanda, College and Research Libraries News.
Yeah, so as we've mentioned and talked about a little bit, we do College and Research Libraries News accepts column submissions, although generally those column submissions go, they may go through or be done in collaboration with our editor-in-chief, David Free. But generally, as you heard from Gina, those column submissions are often just going straight through the pipeline of the committee that is reviewing or is focused on that area. I think a large majority of our content is those professional or practice focused articles, which are shorter. I would say generally between like 1,500 to 3,000 words. And those are sent directly to our editor, David Free, but there are opportunities for more, I guess we would call them, they would maybe be akin to an editorial, but they're called commentaries in CNRL news. So they're often designated as the way I see it essays. And so those are generally the types of submissions that we accept. Of course, there's also, in the news kinds of items that are submitted. And so if you have things that are changing at your library or in your personal life or professional life, you can always share that and we can publish that there as well. But in terms of creating and authoring content, these are the three categories normally that submissions fall into.
Thank you, Amanda. And I appreciate how you connected commentaries with editorials and highlight that each journal may have a slightly different vocabulary or way of describing different kinds of things, and again, may have different requirements. So if folks are feeling a little bit overwhelmed or confused, yes, we all have our own jargon and vocabulary that are native to our journals, and that's probably going to arise in today's presentation. Communications and information literacy.
Great. Hi, Amanda. Thanks for having me again. And my name is Jacqueline Williams, and I'm, as Allison said earlier, one of the co-editors for CIL along with Chris and April. In terms of types of submissions for our journal, again, which is an open access peer-reviewed journal, there are 4 types. So we have research articles, traditional research articles, which are peer-reviewed and indexed. We also have innovative practices. They are also peer-reviewed. They're often case studies, or they are case studies. We have perspective pieces, which we describe in our author guidelines as provocative and thoughtful essays. And lastly, we have book reviews. In addition to these 4 types of submissions, we also invite authors and scholars to organize guest issues and guest editorials on occasion.
And Kristen, I think I saw you nod your head. I think College and Research Libraries has book reviews also. Is that correct?
Yes. So Melissa Lockaby is our book reviews editor, and I apologize for not mentioning that we also have book reviews. So that is another publication we have, and Melissa reviews those. So I wanted to get that in. Thank you, Amanda. I'm sorry for missing that.
No problem, Kristen. We're sharing a lot of information today. Allison, Journal of Information Literacy.
Thank you. So we also have 4 types of submissions. So the research articles are peer reviewed. They tend to be around about 8,000 words and could be on any topic related to information literacy. We then have project reports, which are editor reviewed. Project reports tend to be shorter, so between 1,000 to 5,000 words. And there's sometimes a bit of confusion what the difference between research articles and project reports are. So the main difference, the way that I see it, is that research articles should be driven by an arguable research question, whereas a project report is more focused on sort of building and sharing good practice, either in developing a project or a resource. So we still see project reports as really important to sort of advancing the field, developing, situated in relation to existing literature, etc. But it really focuses more on showcasing innovative practices and development of those areas. Then we also have book reviews. Typically, we do send out a call for book reviews. We have so send out books to people to review. But if people have another book that hasn't been reviewed, we're very open to receiving requests to review a book as well. And then we also accept conference reports. Again, we typically send out a call for people to write conference reports, but we're really happy if people want to approach us saying they're going to X exciting conference and would like to write a report about that as well.
Thank you, Allison. I think I saw there may be some LILAC reports. For folks who don't know, LILAC is the Information Literacy Conference in the UK. I think those were in today's issue as well.
They were. We had 3 LILIC reports, and typically we really try and get new professionals to write those because it's a really great way to start with your writing career and low pressure way of getting published.
Well, thank you, Allison.
Mm.
Michelle, the Journal of the Medical Library Association.
I think I speak for everybody when I say you're probably overwhelmed with things that we are publishing, everybody else. So please go to our website and just look and scroll and see what we have. But for the Medical Library Association, the types of columns that we have are, we have columns such as History Matters, where people are invited to write on the history of medical librarianship or health or historical topics that are health sciences relations to health sciences librarianship. And then we have commentaries. I really like the how somebody described the commentaries for their journal. Our commentaries present viewpoints on timely topics of interest of health sciences librarianships and information specialists, which differs a little bit from our letters to the editors, which is a comment on a recent JMLA article. We have special papers. Those are papers that are peer reviewed on a particular topic that we've actually asked and submitted queries and said, hey, we'd like papers on this topic, please submit them. Other areas that we do, which are probably a little bit more unique to medical libraries, we do knowledge synthesis articles. They're peer-reviewed review articles. They're systematic reviews and scoping reviews and narrative reviews, which looks at the body of research for an entire topic. And then people would write the knowledge synthesis on that. We also have original investigations and case reports. The best way I can describe case reports for people is projects that you've done within your institution or your library that, hey, we've done this and look how it worked out, kind of a thing. Those are case reports for us. So those are some of the things that we publish, and we're always forgot book reviews and resource reviews. We also do, like everybody else, book reviews, but we also do resource reviews, which are electronic resources, software, web services, those kind of technology tools. So we do reviews on those.
Excellent, thank you. And it sounds like there's a lot of opportunities with JMLA in terms of genre and format. Elisa, Portal.
Yeah, I'm also going to try to focus on what we publish that's most unique, because you can see, we are definitely an outlet for peer-reviewed research, but I want to really emphasize the areas of focus that we have for our feature articles. If you go to our author guidelines online, as I think Amanda just noted, that for every journal, that's a wealth of information. We have information on our specific features on our author guidelines website, and we have 3 of them. We have reports from the field. Mark Lenker from University of Nevada, Las Vegas is our editor, and that showcases individual experiences, institutional initiatives or research that might be a little more limited in scope. We also have Global Perspectives, which is another feature edited by Michelle Guitar at Northwestern, and that highlights research and trends and perspectives in a global context, and also very frequently features international authors, partnerships and initiatives with an international emphasis. And then finally, we have Worth Noting, and that's edited by Marianne Stoll-Brockie from Wayne State. And that is kind of similar to reports from the field, but that covers noteworthy trends in academic libraries or higher ed more broadly. And again, that's a venue for case studies, pilot programs, interviews. And so all of our feature articles, as I say here on the slide, those are non-peer reviewed, and you work very closely with the editor of the specific feature that you are going to be dedicated to, which is why I mentioned those editor names. And so those are our major areas that we have possibilities for prospective authors for Portal.
Thank you, Elisa. And a quick follow-up question for Allison Hicks as we transition to our next segment. In terms of the conference reports, are you interested in the specific geographic region, or are you open? Is that wide open in terms of conference reports?
That is wide open. If you can find an information literacy conference in Antarctica, we are here to get that report. But yeah, most of our conference reports do come from more UK, European. So we would love if you would like to submit a conference report for WILU or ACRL or similar as well. That would be brilliant.
Wonderful. Thank you, Allison. And so now, now that you know a little bit more about what kinds of topics and what types of formats each of our journals highlighted today have available to you, we'd like to know a little bit more from our editors. You receive a submission. What are the things that you're looking for when you're evaluating a new submission? And just as a reminder, we've got about 25-30 minutes until we hit the top of the hour. So I realize folks may have a bit of content on their slides. If you maybe want to pick out a highlight or two, and then at the end of this section, if we feel like anything critical has been overlooked, we can add that. Okay, College and Research Libraries news.
So I'll be quick because I've mentioned this several times, but we're really looking in College and Research Libraries news outside of the columns, which I think since those are committee guided and driven, and we're just looking for manuscripts about projects, programs, services that are relevant to other academic librarians or libraries. We're always open to new ideas or starting or trying new things. One thing I'll say very concretely, I think we're taking a little break from AI right now, but I imagine that will be on the forefront again soon. So if you're looking to submit something about AI, we're hitting pause on that for a little while because we've had a lot of that recently.
Thank you so much. And I'm kind of chuckling because some days I feel like I'd like to hit a pause button on AI, even though I think it's very interesting and we need to have these conversations. It can be a little bit overwhelming. Thank you, Amanda. Kristen, what are you looking for?
So these questions that are on here are similar to the few questions that reviewers actually look at as well when they review manuscripts that come in that undergo peer review. So primarily, I'm looking at, does it add a new contribution to the field of academic or research and research librarianship? It might be new at somebody's library, but is it innovative on a national, international level? Is it a new cutting edge topic? And also, is the method, when there's a methodology in the study, is it appropriate for the research? And do the results clearly analyze the data? So we might have data, but what does it mean? And I can interpret from the data what they're saying in the results that I can understand that. So those are some primary things I look at first.
Thank you, Kristen.
For us, we look to see if the article, is in the health medical area, that kind of, and is librarianship. So we get people who do too much medical, not enough librarianship. So it goes first to us, the editors, the chief editors. We decide whether it even meets our scope. If it meets our scope, then we give it to one of our other editors, our editorial staff, who then takes it on and looks to see if it's of interest and within the library or within this journal. Then they assign the peer reviewers, and then the peer reviewers go through the process.
Excellent, thank you. And let me just, there we go. Thank you, Michelle. And communications and information literacy.
Great, thank you. I think Allison and I can both chime in here. So in terms of what you see here on the slide, it's similar to what most others have said, or what you'll see on their slides going forward. We're looking for a thoughtful framing and organizing of one's manuscript. So in terms of just the actual mechanics and design of the actual narrative of the manuscript, we're looking for a clear contribution to the body of knowledge, to the body of scholarship around information literacy. Obviously, scope. We're also looking to see whether the submitter has considered thoughtfully the audience and who CIL is and what we do in terms of our emphasis on IL and higher education, or as Allison said, the linkage between secondary school and higher education. We're looking for clarity and sort of that big picture in the lit review and how it's situating that scholar or that author's work. We're looking at citations. and whether we're seeing a good representation of scholars and authors in the field. We're also, in terms of our process, when we receive pieces, the editorial team takes a quick review. It's actually never a quick review, but each of us takes on a quick a review or an initial review of a piece. We gather a lot of notes and ideas and comments and feedback. We share that amongst ourselves before we send it out to review or respond back to the author. Allison, did I hit everything there?
Yeah, I think you hit everything. I would just add that one of the biggest things that I think we often look for and talk about amongst ourselves is what we sometimes call, or what you might sometimes hear called, the so what of the article. So basically, like, what, looking for sort of, the thoughtful framing, that goes to sort of the thoughtful framing and what this adds to the scholarly conversation. So, being very clear about the so what, or what this adds to the scholarly conversation, or what makes this novel or new, is always something that helps a lot for the editorial process to help us make a decision about how to evaluate an article.
Thank you, Jacqueline and Allison. And Journal of Information Literacy, Allison.
Thank you. Yeah, so we have a lot of similarities with other people who have answered. I think one of the biggest things for us is we do receive quite a lot of submissions focusing on digital literacy and media literacy, and that's really important for us. Obviously, as the title of our journal indicates, we are primarily interested in information literacy, and we're really happy to publish on digital or media literacy topic, or any other ocean literacy, whatever literacy you can think of, but there has to be a clear connection back to information literacy, sort of talking about how that relates back to information literacy and referencing some of that literature from the information literacy field as well. So that's, yeah, thinking about how you contribute to the scholarship of information literacy. We were originally set up as a way to encourage new authors, so we are particularly keen to encourage, and we're trying to encourage submissions from underrepresented groups. We're also particularly keen to recognise the sharing of knowledge between researchers and professionals as well. We think that's really important. Things that we look out for when we're reviewing papers. Obviously, apart from all the other things people have mentioned, we're also particularly keen to think about ethics. So making sure that your study was conducted in an ethical manner and making that really clear. And also the methods as well. That's really important to us. You don't need to be writing, a whole treatise on the methods you use, but we do want to make sure that you're using appropriate methods, sort of explaining why they're appropriate and establishing the steps that you took within the study that you took. For us, we're not necessarily excited about hot takes on the latest exciting thing. We're really focusing very much on sort of, more of that measured approach. So we're really happy to revisit old topics, look at failures, things like that as well. It doesn't necessarily need to be the most exciting new topic in the world. We're really keen to take a broad perspective on that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Allison. And Portal, Alisa.
Thanks. This is from our author guidelines and very similar to what some of the other journals ask for. We really do that so what that was mentioned, we really do look for originality, and also articles that we know are really going to be relevant and of interest to our journal's readership. We have always, Portal's celebrating in 2025, we'll be celebrating our 25th anniversary. And throughout all 25 years, we've really had a focus on mentoring new and underrepresented authors. And as I write here, that's primarily through our feature articles editorial process. But we always welcome pre-submission inquiries. Don't hesitate to reach out. And similarly, we have the rubric that is used by our reviewers in navigating the submission evaluation process is available on our author guidelines website. So we have a lot of information there, and we are always happy to really converse one-on-one with any prospective authors to answer any questions that they might have about their article, the topic suitability to Portal, and possible ways to publish through Portal, whether it's through our peer-reviewed articles or through our feature articles path.
Thank you, Alisa. I think that's a great point that you bring up about pre-submission inquiries. And I think some people are hesitant to do it, but it's a great way to determine quickly if what you're writing about is going to be within scope. So you don't spend months putting together a manuscript for a particular journal and find out that it's not really within.
Yep.
One thing I'll say quickly before we move on to the next section, a lot of folks today have hit on the idea of originality, significant contribution. I really like the framing that Allison from CIL used about the so what. In my experience, be direct as an author about those things. Make sure you're being direct and explicit in your manuscript about why you think this work is important and what gap you think it's filling currently, whether that's a practice gap or a scholarly gap or a combination of both. But make sure you claim that so that you're not leaving it to the reader to interpret. That, in my experience, often makes for a much stronger manuscript submission, but I know it can also be a little bit scary and overwhelming to try and claim that particular contribution, but it is an important part of the process. And so a related question, you've outlined some of the general criteria that you're using. How do you make the decisions about what goes into the peer review pipeline or maybe the editor review pipeline? Kristen.
So before I send a manuscript to peer review, I have to make sure it's anonymized. When folks don't follow the author guidelines, it takes a little more time and I have to send it back to them to fix, and then it just takes a lot more time. I look to see, of course, does it fit within scope of the journal? I look at the citations. Are they relevant? What are the dates of the citations depending on the nature of the study? Is the writing, one of the questions for the reviewers is it written for an educated yet generalized audience, because it's such a broad scope of anything with college and research libraries. Within the journal, there's a wide readership. So the author guidelines, when those are followed, it indicates to me that the author is very interested in publishing CNR and RL, and it saves time for me and for them for consideration. And the robust literature review for that, how it connects with other research instead of just an insular, their study and, a few other places. And a lot of times I find it very compelling when authors bring in studies from other fields as well to break out of just our little world of academic librarianship to see how it relates with other professions, because I think it makes it a more compelling argument and discussion.
Thank you, Kristen. Amanda at College and Research Libraries News.
So I'll be very quick since we've already talked about this. I said nothing goes into peer review, which is incorrect. I was thinking very narrowly as I was putting together this slide about the peer review process at many of these other journals, some of which I've worked through as an author. As we heard from Amanda and from Gina, the SLILC is reviewing columns. The same goes with our scholarly communications column. But pretty much everything else is going through editorial review to David Free. So I can speak more on that if folks have questions, but I want to give my time to the other publications so you can talk more about this.
Thank you, Amanda. And Elisa, Portal.
Yeah, like Kristen also said as well, the scope of our journal is really important. When this is the primary thing in my mind when I'm looking at a new submission and deciding if it should be forwarded for peer review. And that's why, going back to those pre-submission inquiries, if you're not sure about your topic and whether it fits within the scope of a journal, reaching out beforehand can definitely save time. And when I do receive submissions that are out of scope for our journal, maybe it's focused on public libraries, maybe it's focused, a really heavy duty article on like bibliometrics that's not within the context of higher education at all. I will always try to give ideas for other journals that might be more suited outlets to that specific topic. And then it may seem kind of quantitative, but I will also often, in addition to looking at those elements that Kristen talked about, I'll also look at the length of the article. If it is a If it's a 10-page double-spaced article, it almost is maybe more of a comment. And so it may be something that, again, needs to be developed more. And so that may not get placed under peer review as well. And then, does it contain original research? If it's more of a case study, more practice focused, I may forward it to one of our feature editors for consideration.
Thank you, Elisa. And before we hop to our next question, anything else that our other panelists would like to add about the peer review pipeline?
I think from us, it is extremely difficult to find good peer reviewers. And for our journal, almost everybody, we do pay a copy editor, but our entire journal publishing process is volunteer, including the peer reviewers. So life happens, and peer reviewers do not want to get bombarded by 800 different articles that they're asking to be peer reviewed. Also, peer reviewers are human, and some of them are better than others. So the peer review process it can take a little bit of time, especially if you're on a topic that doesn't have a lot of experts who could peer review. So it's hard to find peer reviewers sometimes. And that I noticed one person was talking about how long does it take for an article to be published. Sometimes it really can get delayed in the peer reviews. I can't find enough peer reviewers to peer review it. That really holds back that article.
Yeah, and I just want to chime in to say really fast that the decision of whether to send something to peer review or not is never based on whether the article is perfect or not. In fact, a lot of articles, are not that we receive aren't perfect, and they get sent to peer review, and it is, a lot of the peer reviewer's job to sort of help develop that article further and help make it the best that it can be before it gets published. So you should always submit your best work, but you don't have to worry if it's not completely perfect, because the peer reviewers will comment on that. That's part of their job. At the same time, as Michelle is kind of, I think also referring to, we never want to waste our peer reviewers' time, because peer review does take a lot of time and effort on their part. So that's something that we also think about, in addition to a lot of the stuff that has also been talked about in terms of scope and originality and all of that. But you don't have to wait, until something feels perfect to submit it, or worry that it's, may not be perfect. But it's always should be your best work. But your peer reviewers will also give you a lot of really good guidance about, what more might need to be done.
These are both great points. I appreciate this. And I'll share too, many years ago, I think it was before Allison was the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Information Literacy, I sent a manuscript that had a misspelling in the title of the manuscript, and it went through the peer review process, and all of that could be corrected. But the moment I realized that I sent a manuscript through with a typo in the peer review process, I thought I was toast, and I was very embarrassed. But this also, I think, relates to a question that I saw come through the Q&A a little bit earlier about what we might mean by peer review here. And is that, the formal process that the journal undertakes after you've submitted, or does peer review prior to submission count? And I think we're all talking here about the very formal, usually anonymized process that happens after you submit an article for publication. But I hesitate to speak for all of us, so I feel fairly confident with this one. We do recommend that you have colleagues review your work prior to submitting to a journal. Again, nobody is expecting perfection necessarily when we receive those manuscripts, and there's going to be a conversation about that manuscript as it moves through the process. But if you can get some feedback from colleagues prior to submission, chances are you're going to have a stronger manuscript going into that pipeline. Yes, I see Gina has her hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up a question that was asked in the chat about how often articles are sent to peer review versus how many of those are just rejected off the bat. And maybe a couple folks could weigh in verbally, and if other folks have stuff to comment, you can put it in the chat as well.
I mean, if it's anonymized and it's within scope, which is a very broad scope for college and research libraries, I will send it for peer review. So I would, off the top of my head, guess like a 10%, desk rejection, meaning, not being sent to peer review, but that's only if it's about something that isn't within scope and that it's just random. It just feels like it's been randomly put in, submitted, that it's not relevant. So I try to, have it under consideration as long as it fits within scope.
And I think I actually misunderstood the question. It was also, once you send it to peer review, how many of those get like accepted versus just rejected based on the peer review, I guess.
Yeah, I can answer for Jill. So I'm a bit hesitant. We have got a fairly high rejection rate pre-peer review, but I swear, I promise, and knowing this is being recorded, it's mostly because it's completely out of scope. That's what most of our rejections come from. After peer review, our rejection rate is super low because we would much prefer to work with authors to work out their niche problems, to respond to peer review feedback. So it's probably about like 1% rejection rate after peer review. So that's the number I'm going to share.
I would like to second that. We probably have a very higher than normal submission rejections or desk rejects because we're indexed in Medline, and a lot of medical people just look to see whatever journals are indexed in Medline and just blindly submit to them regardless of the topic. So I get a lot of medical articles on gene research and things like that, which have nothing to do with libraries or librarianship. And those are automatically desk rejected. Desk rejected are things that come in that have nothing to do with the scope of the journal. And I just can easily go, whoop, that kind of a thing. So we have a high rejection rate from that. However, once we get the ones that are within the libraries, I would like to say that we do pretty good. We send those things to peer review. And then even then, if the peer reviewer has a lot of options for us, they can reject outright. That's one option, but they can also say accept with revisions. They can also say return and revise and resubmit. So that's not a rejection, but they found things that need to be, that's more than just we need to fix some simple things of editing in here. And so those are some ways that those aren't rejections. So if the author works with us, those can be published.
I'll chime in for CIL. I would say the most common reason for rejection would be the manuscript is simply out of scope, similar to other editors' comments today. Yeah, most common reason would be out of scope. Once manuscripts do go to peer review, we have, I would say, a robust or high rate of acceptance there afterwards. So again, I think speaking and getting to know all of the editors here today, there's a deep ethic of care about the process and the investment of time that authors and scholars, librarians have put into their work. So we're willing, I think we have a demonstrated record, all of us, of working with authors and scholars to make their work stronger for publication.
Thank you, everyone. And of course, I'm getting a Teams call right now, which never happens. Hopefully that has not disturbed anything in this webinar. We'll be moving on to the next question here in a moment, but we are close to the top of the hour and looking at some of the questions that have come through the Q&A, and we've had a lot of really great questions. Enough that I think if we could get the band back together again in a few months, I think there might be plenty of questions there for another conversation. I think we may continue to move through the planned content as the rest of the content that we have planned for today's session aligns with several of the questions that have come through the Q&A. So we may have a little less time for audience Q&A, but I do think some of your questions will be answered as we move through the slides. Do our panelists and my co-moderators feel comfortable with that decision? I'm hearing some head nods. Great, thank you. So our next question is, what information literacy topics or kinds of submissions are you interested in right now? And Kristen, college and research libraries.
So I just listed a couple things, but I'm very, I'm open to all kinds of topics, that something that again, that is new to the field, or a new approach to teaching information literacy. I'm particularly interested as an editor. The next editor may have different interests, that working with marginalized student groups and artificial intelligence literacy, like as a component of information literacy. I'm interested in those things, but I'm also very interested in other approaches that authors may submit that are new and innovative to consider.
Thank you, Kristen. I think you raise a good point here too, that I won't belabor, but editors change over time. And so some of the practices will also change over time as a result, or the types of submissions that folks are looking for, which is great. We need new perspectives. We need to be dynamic and we need to evolve. But what we say today, we're giving a lot of good generalities for new authors to consider when they're thinking about potentially putting their hat into the ring for publishing. But some of the specifics for each journal may change over time. Allison, the Journal of Information Literacy.
Yeah, and I think I was feeling particularly punchy when I wrote my suggestions, and I've just been reading all the provocations for the 50th anniversary, so apologies. But some things I would love to see, thinking about power and agency. I don't think we think enough about the conditions that enable and constrain the way in which information literacy is enacted in a variety of settings. So I would love to see more research on that. And then thinking about outcomes as well, thinking about how we develop support agency would be really fascinating to me too. Also, disability, neurodiversity and information literacy, and moving. I know we've had recently, there's been some research in how we teach for populations, neurodiverse populations or disabled populations, but I'd really like to think more about learning as well. So how neurodivergent people use information to learn, and how and the implications as well for disability, perhaps thinking about how ableism is structured within our guiding documents, etc. I'd love to see some research on that. I haven't seen very much ever on green and climate change and ecological and environmental, sustainable, anything to do with that related to information literacy. It would be fascinating. And then very finally, thinking about the negative space, which is something new. So we had a study last year in Jill, which looked at actually thinking about how various 4chan trolls could actually be considered fairly information literate. So I'm really interested in exploring that idea of socially polarizing groups and thinking about how information literacy is used in negative ways and what that means for information literacy and teaching and moving forward. So those are my very wild ideas for what I would love to see, but anything else as well would be great.
I like that you were punchy. These are really exciting topics, Allison. And I will say too, having just attended Willu in British Columbia, there may have been a few presentations there that might fit in the Green IL. I'll have to go back and look through the program and see if that's
great.
true.
Send them my way.
Excellent. Any other thoughts from our panelists about themes or topics that you're particularly interested in related to information literacy right now?
This is Allison Hosier. I would say for communications and information literacy, and Jacqueline can correct me on this if I'm off track, but I mean, we really are just interested. We're very open about, we want information literacy in higher education. So if you're writing about information literacy in higher education, please feel free to submit to us. We're interested in taking a look at what you're doing. But we're also very interested, I think, in international perspectives. We're trying to expand on that a little bit as well to capture information literacy from a more international perspective. And from a personal viewpoint, I've seen a lot of articles recently published in various places and submitted to us as well that sort of are really taking a critical look at information literacy as far as, asking questions about what information literacy is and whose values it reflects, and whose, what purpose it serves and whose purposes it serves, which I think are really interesting and really, really important. And I'm really excited to see that. I think some strain of that has probably been around in our scholarship for a long time, but it seems like it's really gaining momentum. And as a scholar and as an editor, I'm really interested in seeing more of that, which I think also relates to some of what Allison Hicks was saying a minute ago.
I would say think about, it doesn't have to be necessarily research. Think about theoretical perspectives too on information literacy, really challenging established things in our field and putting forth that informed perspective on how things might change related to things that we're struggling with or that students have needs around today. Again, if you look at those hot topics that Allison shared, lots of ideas there. And some of Portal's best information literacy focused articles have been purely theoretical. So that possibility is always there.
Thank you so much, everyone. Our next question is, what advice would you give to a relatively new or first-time author? And I'll interject here for a moment. I think in some of our planning conversations around this panel, one purpose is to humanize editors and editors-in-chief. We realize that we hold positions of power. I say we, I'm a former, but I feel a kindred spirit with this group of colleagues. And especially when you're a new author, it can be very overwhelming to reach out to somebody who you feel wields an incredible amount of power over what you do or potentially even your career trajectory. But we are all just humans, and hopefully we're reassuring folks that editors and editors-in-chief were approachable colleagues who are willing to answer questions. So that was also part of today's conversation. But again, enough of my editorializing here. Kristen, college and research libraries, what is some of the advice that you would give?
So before I talk about these two bullets, I want to say, please, as a first-time author or new author, to don't be afraid to ask editors about your submission. That's one of the things that we do, and that I'm very interested, and I'm always happy when people consider CNRL as a place that they would be interested in publishing their work. So that never ever underestimate an author query to the editor. Obviously, preaching to the choir, write about something you were passionate about. You're spending a long time on this, and it will help carry you through when it's like the grunt work of the revisions. And when you get the feedback from the peer reviewers, I would say sleep on it, take a walk. You've spent a long time on what your manuscript, and the intention is to help improve the manuscript, but there's so much emotion and work put into this that I would say just, look at it and take a little time to think about it. That's my advice.
Thank you, Kristen. I think both of those are so important. I especially still need to be reminded of that after receiving feedback. Don't just jump in to work on that. And I think it's worth saying here, since we may have a lot of potential first-time authors, after you go through the peer review process, you're going to receive feedback from the peer reviewers and possibly also the editor. That's an invitation for a conversation, and that can feel really overwhelming. But you do have some agency and voice there in terms of making revisions, writing responses to reviewers' feedback, what you think you can address, what you think might be outside the scope of the study. So if you are a first-time author and you're receiving a revise and resubmit with substantial feedback, you have a colleague who's been through this process before. I encourage you to reach out to them because you do have some agency in responding to that feedback and thinking about what you're going to submit as a revised manuscript. And again, you can follow up with the editor about specific questions that you have about that feedback and what they would like to see if it wasn't clear. Right, Elisa at Portal, what kind of advice would you give?
Well, I really appreciate some of the comments that are happening in the chat, including one of our board members and former feature editor, Mary Beth Slobodnik, said, that we really want our feedback it's really there to help you improve your article. And that is the hope of every editor and every reviewer is bringing that article to an even better place, right? Being as formative as possible. So, reinforcing what Amanda said, like, don't hesitate to ask questions about it. Take your time and sleep on that feedback and think about it. And it's going to get clearer and it's going to get more doable the more that you kind of process it. But my advice to a first-time author would be, you know, start with that little seed of an idea, you know, maybe share it out as a case studies, but start sharing what you're doing. And you're doing a lot. We are all doing a lot. And so talking with a mentor sometimes about the things that you're doing and how you could share out those activities or embed research within your practice are all valuable ways to get yourself started in the publishing process.
These are great points, Lisa. And to follow up on one of your initial comments, again, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I don't feel like any editor ever really enjoys giving a reject decision, particularly after the peer review process. But at any point, like, there's no pleasure in that.
My gosh, it's so hard. And I don't know about all the other editors, but when I do have to do a reject, I never send it immediately. I may draft it, I revisit it again, I think about it more, I sleep on it more. It's a very, very hard process.
I think also for us, that is definitely one of the hardest things. That's more hard than anything, I think. But one for us also, which is difficult, is, as I mentioned, we're all volunteers. The people who are, you know, writing the articles are also volunteers. They're not getting paid for these articles. Once I've sent the peer review responses back to the author, then not hearing from the author, being ghosted by the author. There's been times where I've been ghosted for, you know, 6 months. I attended a conference and an author got a hold of me and goes, "Oh, I need to get you that article," a year ago. You know, so that's some of the things that we also are dealing with, is like, sometimes the authors, we would love this research, but the authors, I don't know, they've got lives too. And so that's a difficult area, because those are things that we want to also, the peer reviewers liked it, we liked it, needs a little bit of restructuring or clarification or something, and then oof. So those are some of the areas that's also difficult.
Thank you, Michelle. And we have a few other points here that we've kind of, in our planning conversations, and again, through the creation of the slide deck here, some generalized advice from our editorial panel. I don't think we can say this enough: follow the journal guidelines. And we know each journal is so different. And if you're used to writing in Chicago, but the journal wants APA, that is very, very difficult to do. It's difficult to retrain your brain to write in a new way. But each journal does have specific guidelines. Each journal does share those on their website, so do become familiar with them. And again, do reach out to the editor if you're really not sure about something. And then know your audience. You're hoping that other folks are going to be reading your article, and you probably have a particular audience in mind. So again, you're not writing just for the editor, not just for the reviewers, but hopefully the folks that will be interacting with your manuscript after it's been published. Get your feet wet. And I think this has come up a couple of times today. You know, things like the perspectives on the framework column, or other features or other submissions to a publication like College and Research Libraries News. Write book reviews for, you know, ACRL has Choice, which does academic book reviews in a variety of fields. That can be a great way to get started. Doing a blog entry for a professional association, whether it's at the national level or at the regional level. These are all ways to start getting yourself used to writing for a more public audience. This has come up too: identify some support options. Often colleagues are interested in mentoring folks who haven't yet published, and there may be some support resources within your own library, but there may also be some support through different kinds of professional associations that you're involved with. For example, I know the Library Research Roundtable, that's part of the American Library Association, does a mentoring program, and that could be a great kind of way to receive support outside of your institution. Reflect on your process, and what are some of the obstacles that are preventing you from writing or from finally hitting the submit button. for that journal, and think about, how you might be able to overcome those, or work with your mentor to make up a plan for taking action. Pay it forward. So if you've had the experience of publishing and somebody hasn't quite taken that leap yet, but they're interested, encourage them. Let them know that you think that they have something worth sharing and that others in the profession could benefit from it, and that they can be part of this broader conversation. And of course, become a peer reviewer for a journal that you're interested in. It's a great way to see the types of submissions that are coming through. And I'll tell you, as an author, you get a completely different perspective on manuscripts when you do a review, and you can bring that then into your work and thinking about how you could strengthen that submission. We have about 5 minutes here. I want to see if any of our journal editors have anything to add to the advice.
Yeah, this is
I have
Hosier again. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm speaking a lot, but I just wanted to, I think this is all great, and I just want to echo what Kristen said earlier about, identifying a passion and following it, and don't worry if it takes time to do that. Sometimes you have to be doing some research and writing for a while before you realize what your passion is. But I also want to say, a lot of us have said here today that what we look for is originality and the so what and all of that, and that can be really intimidating, especially as a first-time author, where you might feel like, well, I'm not really up to the originality. What if it's not original enough? What if it's not groundbreaking enough? And I think as long as you're clear about what you're adding to the scholarly conversation, you're good to go. It doesn't have to be the most groundbreaking thing ever, especially your first time out of the gate. If it is, that's really cool, but don't be too intimidated by the idea of, oh, I have to contribute something original. If I don't have anything original to contribute, it's not worth it. It's definitely worth it if it's your passion or if it's something that you're really interested in, and if you can show that it really adds to the conversation. So don't be intimidated by that. Keep it in mind, but don't be intimidated by it.
I would echo that. Absolutely. Thanks, Allison. I would also make a few other suggestions. So one would be, if you are not, if you don't have the support structure, if you don't have access to an Office of Scholarly Publishing, if you don't have the PD to participate in other structures, publishing groups that are dedicated, or organizations that are dedicated to supporting scholarly publishing. First, I'll say with CIL, I think we've demonstrated that commitment to inspiring and supporting new authors by working with, and it's linked from our author guideline page, I believe, with the library writing, is it committee? I'm drawing a total blank. Miranda is there, Hensley in the chat, so she can chime in on the proper title.
Cooperative?
Yes, thank you. I just could not think of what's the say, the Library Writing Cooperative. Thanks, Allison. But I would also say take more agency yourself and start your own research and publishing committee in your library or at your campus. Do not limit yourself from forming your own group for writing, for publishing, for accountability. I did that during COVID, and it was the biggest blessing, I have to say. And had I not taken that agency and said, hey, I need to surround myself with other people to keep myself motivated and on track and to bounce ideas around, I would have floundered. So know that your ideas matter to us, and we're all here to try to build our collective knowledge and our collective understanding about IL and librarianship. So be bold and think big, right? I'm representative of someone who through digital means is across the world, as is Allison. So think big. Do not limit yourself to thinking about working with libraries and journals, partners, colleagues that are global. We live in an interconnected world, and COVID taught us that more than anything. So reach out. We want to hear from you.
Thank you so much, everybody. I think that brings us to the end of our presentation today. We had a question about timelines, but I know that all of our journals probably do share a little bit of information on our websites about timelines, but you can always reach out to an editor and ask what's going on in terms of the pipeline when you've submitted. A couple of expressions of gratitude today. I thank everybody for joining us today for this conversation. Thank you so much to our attendees who have provided thoughtful questions and commentary in the chat and the question and answer. Huge thank you, of course, to our editor panelists for being willing to have this conversation today. I wish I would have had something like this when I was a relatively new author. So again, hopefully today we're starting a new chapter and making our practices transparent and making editors approachable for our colleagues. Thank you so much to Lorna and Gina, and again, our panelists for answering questions in the chat and the Q&A as we were moving through today's panel discussion. I know that's difficult to do, but much appreciated. And thank you again to Aloha Sharp from ACRL, as well as Margot Conahan, which is the SLILC ACRL staff liaison, for helping us with the logistics for today. They really make doing these kinds of presentations very easy, and we don't have to think about a lot in terms of Zoom setup, so much appreciated. Hopefully, editors, maybe we can get the band together again to talk about some of the questions we weren't able to answer, but thank you to everyone for your time and engagement today. It's much appreciated.